Lena Moore thought she had won. After fleeing Chicago 7 months pregnant, abandoning everything she knew to escape the most dangerous man she'd ever loved, she believed the secret growing inside her would remain hers alone. She chose a forgotten hospital in rural Tennessee precisely because it didn't exist on any map that mattered. But as she held her newborn daughter after 40 brutal hours of labor, exhausted and vulnerable, the door opened. Adrian Falcone stood there, impeccably dressed, devastatingly calm, eyes fixed on the child in her arms. He had never stopped hunting, and now he had found them both. Welcome to a story of secrets, power, and the impossible choices we make for the ones we love. If you're drawn to tales of dangerous men and the women who challenge them, stay until the end. You won't regret it. And please, hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the delivery room hummed with mechanical indifference as Lena Moore finally heard the sound she'd been waiting 40 hours to hear, her daughter's first cry. The wail was strong, indignant, furious at being pulled from warmth into the harsh reality of the world. Lena understood that fury intimately. "She's perfect," the nurse said, placing the tiny squirming bundle on Lena's chest. 8 pounds, 2 ounces, strong lungs. Lena's arms came up automatically, cradling the infant against her hospital gown. The baby's cries softened to hiccuping whimpers as she found her mother's heartbeat. Lena looked down at the scrunched face, the miniature fists waving weakly, the dark wisps of hair plastered to a delicate skull, and felt something crack open inside her chest, something painful and precious and utterly terrifying. "Hello, Isla," she whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming. "I'm your mama." The nurse smiled, making notes on a clipboard. "Beautiful name. Do you have the father's information for the birth certificate?" Lena's entire body went rigid. "No," she said, the word coming out harder than she intended. "There's no father. Just leave it blank." The nurse's expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that might have been judgment or pity. Lena had seen that look before, many times in the past 7 months. Single mother. Unwed. Alone. The scarlet letter of modern rural Tennessee, where people still whispered and churches still mattered and women like her were cautionary tales. "Of course," the nurse said, her voice professionally neutral. "We'll get you set up in recovery. You did beautifully, honey. Really beautifully." The words were kind, but Lena barely heard them. She was too busy studying Isla's face, cataloging every feature with desperate attention. The slope of her nose. Would that change? The shape of her eyes, still swollen from birth, but what color would they be? The curve of her chin, the set of her ears, the tiny birthmark just above her left eyebrow. Lena was searching for herself in those features, praying she would find only herself. Because if she saw him, if she saw even a trace of Adrian Falcone in this innocent face, she didn't know if she could bear it. They moved her to a private room 2 hours later. Lena had specifically requested the smallest, most isolated room in the facility. Grayson County Hospital wasn't large to begin with, 23 beds, understaffed, serving a population that had been declining for decades. The building itself looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s, all industrial tile and beige walls and windows that didn't quite seal properly. It was perfect. Nobody who mattered would ever think to look for her here. This hospital didn't show up on national databases. The staff was local, insular, uninterested in outside affairs. The town of Latchfield, Kentucky, technically just across the Tennessee border, but Lena had told everyone she was from Nashville, was the kind of place where people came to disappear, and Lena had needed to disappear more than she'd ever needed anything in her life. "You comfortable?" A different nurse, older, with kind eyes and capable hands, adjusted Lena's pillows. "You want me to take the baby to the nursery so you can sleep?" "No." Lena's arms tightened instinctively around Isla, who was nursing with fierce determination. "She stays with me." The nurse nodded, unsurprised. "First-time mamas usually feel that way. You buzz if you need anything, and try to rest when she does. You're going to need your strength." When the door closed, Lena finally let herself exhale. The silence of the room was punctuated only by Isla's soft suckling sounds and the distant beep of monitors from somewhere down the hall. Through the window, she could see nothing but darkness and the faint outline of trees against a moonless sky. 7 months. She had survived 7 months of running, hiding, rebuilding herself from nothing. 7 months of working cash-only jobs under a borrowed name. 7 months of checking over her shoulder, jumping at shadows, seeing his face in every crowd. 7 months of carrying his child and trying desperately not to think about what that meant. Isla finished nursing and fell asleep instantly, her rosebud mouth still pursed as though dreaming of milk. Lena adjusted her carefully in the plastic hospital bassinet, then leaned back against the pillows, her body screaming with exhaustion. The epidural had worn off. Everything hurt, the kind of deep primal pain that reminded her she was still animal, still flesh and blood and nerve endings. The doctors had said she'd torn, that she'd need stitches, that recovery would take weeks. Lena had barely listened. She had survived worse pain than this. She had survived leaving Adrian Falcone. The memory hit her without warning, as it always did, sharp and sudden and utterly devastating. His apartment. 3 a.m, her hands shaking as she packed a single bag with whatever she could carry. The pregnancy test hidden at the bottom, 2 pink lines that had changed everything. His jacket still draped over the chair where he'd left it, smelling of expensive cologne and smoke and something darker she'd never been able to name. The framed photo on his nightstand. The two of them at some charity gala, her in a borrowed dress, him looking at her like she was the only person in the room who mattered. She'd left the photo, taken only what was hers, and walked out before dawn, before he could wake and see the truth in her eyes. Lena pressed her palms against her eyelids, willing the memory away. That was over. That life was over. Adrian Falcone, with his 3-piece suits and his dangerous eyes and his empire built on violence and fear, was a chapter she had closed permanently. He would never know about Isla. He would never find them. She had made certain of that. The knock came at 6:47 a.m. Lena jerked awake, disoriented, her body protesting the sudden movement. Isla was crying, had been crying, she realized with a rush of guilty panic. How long had she been asleep? "Come in," she called, reaching for the baby with fumbling hands. The door opened, and Lena's entire world stopped. Adrian Falcone stood in the doorway of her hospital room, perfectly composed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than every piece of furniture Lena owned. His dark hair was immaculately styled, his jaw clean-shaven, his eyes, those devastating gray eyes that had once looked at her with something she'd almost believed was love, fixed on her with absolute certainty. He looked exactly as she remembered, exactly as he'd looked in her nightmares. Lena couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what she was seeing. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. "Hello, Lena," Adrian said quietly. His voice was exactly as she remembered too, cultured, controlled, containing multitudes beneath its calm surface. "It's good to see you." Isla's cries intensified. Lena's arms moved on pure instinct, pulling the baby against her chest, curling her body protectively around the tiny life she'd tried so desperately to hide. "How?" The word came out broken. "How did you—" "May I come in?" Adrian asked, as though this were a social call, as though he hadn't just shattered 7 months of carefully constructed safety with 4 quiet words. He didn't wait for an answer. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him with a soft click that sounded, to Lena's ringing ears, like a prison cell locking. "You can't be here." Lena's voice was gaining strength, even as her hands shook. "You need to leave, right now." Adrian didn't move toward her. He simply stood there, 5 feet from her bed, his hands relaxed at his sides. Unthreatening, unhurried, utterly certain. "I'm not here to upset you," he said. "I'm here because you've just given birth to my daughter, and I wanted to make sure you were both safe." The words landed like physical blows. "My daughter." "She's not—" Lena started, but Adrian's expression stopped her. "Please don't insult my intelligence," he said softly. "I've known since the night you left. I've known every day of the past 7 months. I've known through every move you made, every name you used, every job you took. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when you disappeared? Did you honestly believe I would just let you go?" Lena felt the blood drain from her face. "You've been watching me." "Protecting you," Adrian corrected. "There's a difference." That's not protection, Lena spat. That's stalking. That's why you're still alive, Adrian interrupted, and for the first time something cold entered his voice. That's why you didn't die in that car accident in Memphis. Why your landlord in Knoxville mysteriously decided not to pursue eviction when you couldn't make rent. Why the man who followed you home from the diner in Bowling Green was found 3 states away and told very explicitly never to return. Lena stared at him, her mind reeling. The near miss on the highway, she'd thought it was just bad luck, a drunk driver who'd swerved at the last second. The eviction notice that never came, she'd assumed the landlord had simply forgotten. The man from the diner, she'd told herself she was being paranoid, that he probably wasn't following her at all. You had no right, she whispered. I had every right. Adrian's voice was absolute. You were carrying my child. You think I would let you navigate this world alone? You think I would trust anyone else to keep you safe? Isla had stopped crying, lulled by Lena's heartbeat. The silence between them stretched, taut and dangerous. Why now? Lena finally asked. If you've known all along, why show up now? Adrian's expression shifted, just fractionally, but Lena had once been fluent in his micro-expressions. She saw something that looked almost like pain. Because I've given you every choice up until this moment, he said quietly. I let you run. I let you hide. I let you have your space, your distance, your illusion of freedom. But now she's here. His eyes moved to Isla for the first time, and Lena saw something unguarded flash across his face. And everything changes. You must have known that, Lena. You must have known I would come. I knew you'd try, Lena said, her voice steadier now. I knew you'd look. I didn't think you'd find us. I will always find you. Adrian said it like a promise and a threat wrapped in silk. Every time. No matter where you run or how carefully you hide, I will always find you. Lena looked down at Isla, at the perfect innocent face that had no idea her existence had just triggered a war. What do you want, Adrian? I want to meet my daughter, he said simply. I want to make sure you're both healthy and safe. And then, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Then we're going to talk about what happens next. There's nothing to talk about, Lena said, but even she could hear the weakness in her protest. Adrian smiled, not cruelly, but with the sad knowledge of someone who understood exactly how little power she actually had. There's everything to talk about, he said. But first, may I hold her? The request was so unexpected, so ordinary, that Lena almost laughed. This man, this dangerous, ruthless, terrifying man who controlled half of Chicago's underground economy, was asking permission to hold a newborn baby. No, Lena said. Adrian nodded as though he'd expected that answer. All right, then I'll wait. He moved to the chair in the corner of the room, the uncomfortable vinyl thing that was supposed to be for visitors, and sat down with the same elegant economy of movement he brought to everything. He crossed one leg over the other, adjusted his cufflinks, and settled in as though he had all the time in the world. What are you doing? Lena demanded. Waiting, Adrian said calmly. You said I couldn't hold her. You didn't say I had to leave, so I'll wait until you're ready. I'm never going to be ready. Then I suppose I'll be here a very long time. Lena wanted to scream. She wanted to call for security, call the police, call anyone who might help, but she knew, with the cold certainty of someone who'd once been intimately familiar with Adrian's world, that it wouldn't matter. Security guards could be paid, police could be influenced, and even if they physically removed him from this building, he would simply wait outside. He had waited 7 months. He would wait as long as it took. How did you even find this place? She asked, exhausted. I was so careful. I didn't use credit cards. I didn't use my real name. The doctor you saw in Chicago, Adrian said. Dr. Reeves. You thought you'd been so clever, using a women's clinic that promised confidentiality. But when a woman who's been seeing one of my physicians suddenly disappears, and another physician suddenly receives a very large anonymous donation the next month, it's not difficult to connect the dots. Lena's stomach turned. You bribed my doctor? I bribed everyone who might have information, Adrian said simply. And I had very good people watching very carefully for any signs of a woman matching your description seeking prenatal care. When you showed up at a county health clinic in Memphis using the name Sarah Williams, It took my people approximately 18 hours to confirm it was you. That was 5 months ago, Lena said numbly. Yes. You've been watching me for 5 months. 7 months, Adrian corrected. I found you within 2 weeks of you leaving. I've been watching you the entire time. The violation of it, the complete and utter invasion of every moment she'd thought was hers alone, made Lena's vision blur with tears she refused to let fall. I hate you, she whispered. I know, Adrian said, and he sounded almost sorry. But I'm still not leaving. Imnam, the nurse who came to check Lena's vitals at 8 o'clock, stopped short when she saw Adrian. Oh, she said, her eyes widening. I didn't realize you had company. Should I come back? No, Lena said quickly. Please, come in. Adrian stood immediately, every inch the gentleman. I apologize for being here so early. I'm the baby's father. I came as soon as I heard. The lie, or was it a lie, came so smoothly that the nurse's expression immediately softened. Oh, how wonderful, she exclaimed. Dad made it for the birth? Unfortunately, no, Adrian said, with just the right note of regret. I was out of the country on business, but I got here as fast as I could. The nurse beamed at him, then at Lena. Well, isn't that lovely? And look at her, she's just precious. She began her examination of Lena, checking the incision sites, asking about pain levels, taking vital signs. Through it all, Adrian watched silently from his corner. When the nurse reached for Isla to do the newborn examination, Lena's hands tightened reflexively. It's all right, honey, the nurse said gently. I'm just going to weigh her and check her over. Dad, you want to come see? Adrian moved forward with careful, measured steps. He positioned himself on the opposite side of the examination table from Lena, keeping distance between them, and looked down at Isla for the first time at close range. Lena watched his face, watched for signs of recognition, of possessiveness, of the cold calculation she knew he was capable of. What she saw instead was something far more dangerous. Wonder. She has your mouth, Adrian said quietly, his eyes never leaving Isla's face. And your nose, but her eyes... He glanced up at Lena. Those might be mine. Too early to tell eye color, the nurse said cheerfully, oblivious to the tension crackling through the room. They're usually born with blue or gray eyes. Might change in the coming months. Adrian nodded, accepting this information with the same focused attention he brought to business negotiations. He was learning his daughter, Lena realized with growing horror, cataloging her, claiming her with his eyes, even if he couldn't yet touch her. 8 pounds, 3 ounces, the nurse announced. Up an ounce from birth weight. That's wonderful. She's nursing well? Yes, Lena said. And you're feeling all right? Any excessive bleeding, fever, unusual pain? No, just tired. Of course you are, honey. 40 hours of labor would exhaust anyone. The nurse swaddled Isla expertly and handed her back to Lena. You've got a strong, healthy baby girl. You should be very proud. Thank you, Lena whispered. The nurse turned to Adrian with a warm smile. And congratulations to you, Dad. She's just beautiful. Thank you, Adrian said, his voice perfectly calibrated to sound humble and grateful. We're very blessed. When the nurse left, Lena waited until the door closed completely before speaking. Don't do that, she said coldly. Do what? Pretend. Act like this is normal, like we're some happy family. Adrian returned to his chair, but this time Lena noticed he positioned it slightly closer to the bed. Not by much, maybe 6 inches, but closer. I'm not pretending anything, he said. That nurse assumed I was Isla's father because I am Isla's father. That's not pretense, that's fact. Biology doesn't make you a father. No, Adrian agreed, but it's a start. And I intend to be much more than biology, Lena. You don't get to decide that. Neither do you, not alone, not anymore. Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression serious. I understand why you ran. I understand you were afraid, but running is over now. It's time to face reality. Reality, Lena repeated, her voice brittle. And what reality is that? That you and I created a child together. That she deserves better than a mother in hiding and a father who's a stranger. That whatever exists between us, anger, resentment, fear, whatever you want to call it, is secondary to her well-being. Her well-being, Lena said slowly. You want to talk about well-being? You're a criminal, Adrian. You run an organization that profits from violence and extortion, and I'm a businessman, Adrian interrupted calmly. I manage legitimate enterprises and some less legitimate ones. I make difficult decisions to protect people I care about, and I'm very, very good at keeping the people under my protection safe. Is that what you think this is? Protection? What do you think it is? Lena looked down at Isla, sleeping peacefully against her chest, utterly unaware of the battle being waged over her future. I think it's control, Lena said quietly. I think you can't stand that I left, that I took something from you, that for 7 months I made decisions without your permission, and now you're here to take that power back. Adrian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, rougher, more honest than anything he'd said so far. You want to know the truth, Lena? You're right. I can't stand that you left. When I woke up and found you gone, He stopped, his jaw tightening. I've been in this world long enough to know that nothing good comes from caring about people. Caring makes you vulnerable. Caring gives your enemies leverage. I swore I would never care about anyone enough to be weak. He looked at her directly, and Lena saw something raw in his eyes. And then you happened, he said. You, with your stubborn pride and your sharp tongue and your complete refusal to be impressed by anything I'd built. You made me weak, Lena. You made me want things I knew better than to want. And when you left, his voice dropped. When you left, I realized just how catastrophically weak I'd become. Then you should have let me go, Lena whispered. I can't. The words were simple, absolute. I tried. For 2 weeks I tried. I told myself you'd made your choice, that I should respect it, that the smart thing, the strategic thing, was to cut my losses and move on. He shook his head slowly. But then I found out about the baby, and everything changed. Why? Because she's mine, Adrian said. Because half of her DNA comes from me, which means half of my enemies would view her as a target. Because the Falcone name, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, comes with both power and danger. Because every person who wants to hurt me would see her as the perfect leverage. His eyes bored into hers. Do you understand what I'm saying, Lena? The moment she was conceived, she became part of my world, whether you wanted that or not. Lena felt ice spreading through her veins. Nobody knows about her. Nobody in your world has any idea she exists. Not yet, Adrian agreed. Adrian saw it. Because I've been very, very careful about keeping your location a secret. Because every person I've used to track you has been loyal to me for years and knows what happens if they talk. Because I've made sure that as far as anyone in Chicago knows, you simply vanished. He paused. But I can't keep that secret forever. Eventually, someone will find out. And when they do, Isla becomes a target. Then we'll run again, Lena said desperately. Somewhere farther, somewhere you can't follow. There is nowhere I can't follow. Adrian's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. And there is nowhere that my enemies won't eventually look if they learn she exists. The only way to keep her safe is to claim her publicly, to make it clear that she's under my protection, to ensure that anyone who touches her signs their own death warrant. Lena shook her head violently. No, I won't let you drag her into that world. She's already in that world, Adrian said quietly. The only question is whether she's in it with my protection or without it. That's not a choice. That's an ultimatum. Yes, Adrian said. It is. The honesty of it, the blunt acknowledgement that he was giving her no real choice at all, was somehow worse than any lie would have been. I won't go back to Chicago, Lena said, her voice shaking. I won't live in your apartment and play pretend for your business associates. And I'm not asking you to go back to Chicago, Adrian interrupted. Lena blinked. What? Chicago is complicated right now. There are transitions happening, power structures shifting. It's not the right environment for a newborn. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. I have a property in upstate New York, private estate. Very secure. I was thinking we could start there. We, Lena repeated numbly. Yes. You think I'm going to just leave with you? Take Isla and go live in some compound while you, what? Play house when you're not running your criminal empire? I think, Adrian said carefully, that you're an intelligent woman who understands the reality of her situation. I think you know that fighting me is futile. I think you know that I will get what I want eventually. The only variable is how difficult you make the process. He paused. And I think you love your daughter enough to choose the path that keeps her safest, even if it means swallowing your pride. Lena wanted to throw something at him, wanted to scream that he was wrong, that she would never surrender, that she would find a way to escape him no matter what it took. But when she looked down at Isla's sleeping face, she knew he was right. She would do anything to keep this child safe, even make a deal with the devil who'd fathered her. I need time, she whispered. You have until you're medically cleared to leave this hospital, Adrian said. The doctors say that will be approximately 48 hours. After that, we leave together. And if I refuse? Adrian stood, smoothing his jacket with practiced ease. Then I'll leave you here. I'll walk out of this hospital and go back to New York alone. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. But I'll also make a phone call. One call, Lena. To the people who handle social services in this county. I'll express concern about a single mother with no visible means of support, no permanent address, and no family. I'll suggest they might want to check in, make sure the baby is in a safe, stable environment. Lena's blood turned to ice. You wouldn't. I would do anything necessary to protect my daughter, Adrian said quietly, even from her own mother's stubbornness. He opened the door, then looked back at her one last time. I'll give you space today, he said. Time to think. Time to accept what needs to happen. I'll be back tomorrow morning. His expression softened, just fractionally. I'm not your enemy, Lena. I know it doesn't feel that way right now, but everything I'm doing is to keep you both safe. Safe? Lena repeated, her voice hollow. Is that what you call this? Yes, Adrian said simply. Whether you believe it or not. And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with quiet finality. Lena sat in the sudden silence, Isla warm and trusting against her chest, and felt the walls of her carefully constructed freedom collapse around her. She had run as far as she could run, and it hadn't been far enough. The rest of the day passed in a blur of feeding, changing, trying to sleep while her mind raced in endless circles. Nurses came and went. Meals arrived on plastic trays. Isla woke and nursed and slept and woke again, her internal clock knowing nothing of day or night. Lena held her daughter and tried to think of a way out. By midnight, she'd considered and discarded a dozen plans. She could call the police, and accuse Adrian of what exactly? He'd made no threats. He'd been nothing but courteous to the hospital staff, and Lena knew enough about his world to know that local police were no match for the resources he could bring to bear. She could run again, but where? He'd found her in a town that barely existed. He'd tracked her through false names and cash-only transactions, and now she had a newborn who needed doctors, records, documentation. Running would be 10 times harder with Isla. She could fight him in court, but with what money? What lawyer? And even if she could afford legal representation, Adrian's lawyers would bury her in paperwork while he made his phone calls to social services, questioned her fitness, painted her as unstable. Every path led back to the same conclusion. She was trapped. The knowledge sat in her chest like a stone, heavy and cold and utterly immovable. At 2 in the morning, Isla finally settled into deep sleep. Lena laid her carefully in the bassinet and allowed herself to cry, quietly, so as not to wake the baby. Great gasping sobs that shook her entire body and brought no relief. She had tried so hard. She had been so careful, and it hadn't mattered. Adrian had won before the game even started. When the tears finally stopped, Lena felt emptied out, scraped raw. She washed her face in the tiny bathroom, avoiding her reflection in the mirror. She didn't want to see what 7 months of running and 40 hours of labor and one devastating conversation had done to her features. She returned to the bed and stared at the ceiling, watching the slow movement of headlights across the wall as occasional cars passed on the road outside. The truth, the horrible, inescapable truth, was that Adrian had been right about one thing. Isla was his daughter, and in his world, that made her a target. If Lena had been alone, she would have kept running. She would have changed names every month, moved every 6 weeks, worked under the table, and lived in the shadows for the rest of her life. She would have fought him with everything she had and accepted whatever consequences came. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had Isla to think about, and Isla deserved better than a life spent hiding in cheap motels and small-town diners, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid of the next knock on the door. Maybe, Adrian's protection was real. Maybe his estate was safe. Maybe his resources could give Isla something Lena never could have provided alone: security, stability, education, opportunity. Maybe loving her daughter meant accepting the devil's bargain. The thought made Lena sick with self-loathing. But when she looked at Isla's perfect, sleeping face, she couldn't deny the logic. One chance at a normal childhood, even in an abnormal world, or a lifetime of running that would end the same way regardless. At dawn, Lena made her decision. When Adrian returned, as she knew he would, she would agree to his terms. Not because she forgave him, not because she trusted him, but because she loved her daughter more than she hated him. And sometimes, love meant surrender. Adrian arrived at exactly 8 o'clock the next morning, carrying a leather overnight bag and 2 cups of coffee from somewhere that definitely wasn't the hospital cafeteria. The rich aroma filled the small room instantly, cutting through the antiseptic smell that had become Lena's entire world. "I wasn't sure how you took it anymore," he said, setting both cups on the rolling table. "So I brought cream and sugar on the side." Lena stared at the cups, then at him. She'd spent the entire night preparing herself for this conversation, rehearsing what she would say, how she would frame her surrender as something other than complete defeat. But now, faced with his composed presence and his thoughtful gesture, all her careful words dissolved. "Black," she heard herself say. "I drink it black now." Something flickered in Adrian's expression, recognition, maybe, that she'd changed in the months away from him, that she wasn't quite the same woman who'd fled his apartment in the dark. "A lot of things have changed," she continued, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "I'm not the person I was in Chicago. I know." Adrian remained standing, giving her space, his hands loose at his sides. "Neither am I." Lena reached for the black coffee, more to have something to do with her hands than because she wanted it. The first sip was perfect, strong, hot, expensive. Of course it was. Adrian never did anything halfway. Isla stirred in her bassinet, making the small snuffling sounds that meant she'd be awake and hungry soon. Lena watched Adrian's eyes track to the baby automatically, saw the way his entire posture shifted subtly toward her. Even his body language was claiming her. "I'll go with you," Lena said abruptly, before she could lose her nerve. "To New York. To your estate. I'll go." Adrian went very still. "What changed your mind?" "Nothing changed my mind. I still think this is wrong. I still think you're manipulating me. I still think—" She stopped, drew a breath. "But you were right about one thing. She deserves better than running, better than hiding, and I can't give her that alone." "No," Adrian agreed quietly. "You can't." The blunt acknowledgement should have stung. Instead, Lena found it almost refreshing. No false comfort, no platitudes, just the truth, hard and clean. "But I have conditions," Lena continued, setting down the coffee cup with deliberate care. "If we're doing this, we're doing it on my terms too, not just yours." Adrian's eyebrows rose fractionally. "I'm listening." "First, I want my own space, my own room. I'm not sharing your bed just because we're under the same roof." "Agreed. The estate has 12 bedrooms. You can have your choice of any of them." "Second, I want control over Isla's care. Feeding, sleeping, doctor's appointments, everything. You don't override my decisions about her health or well-being." "Agreed, with one caveat." Adrian's voice was measured. "If I believe a decision you're making puts her at risk, I reserve the right to intervene, but I'll discuss it with you first." Lena wanted to argue, but the compromise was more reasonable than she'd expected. She nodded curtly. "Third, I want to be able to leave, not permanently, not to run away again, but I want to be able to go into town, go for walks, have some kind of freedom. I'm not living in a prison." "The estate grounds are extensive," Adrian said. 40 acres. You can go anywhere on the property. Off the property requires security." "Security?" Lena repeated flatly. Non-negotiable. Adrian's voice was firm. I meant what I said yesterday, Lena. There are people who would hurt you to hurt me. People who would see Isla as leverage. Until I've made certain arrangements, until the right people know that touching either of you means war, you don't leave the property without protection. Lena's hands clenched around the coffee cup. How long? I don't know, weeks, maybe. A month or two at most. So I trade one cage for another. You trade uncertainty for safety, Adrian corrected. There's a difference. Isla's snuffling turned to crying. Lena set down the coffee and lifted the baby from the bassinet, cradling her automatically as she began to nurse. Adrian watched but didn't move closer, maintaining the careful distance he'd established. What happens after? Lena asked, adjusting Isla's position. After your arrangements are made? That depends on you. Meaning? Adrian finally moved, pulling the chair closer to the bed. Not invasively close, but close enough that they could speak without raising their voices over Isla's soft nursing sounds. Meaning, there are several paths forward, he said. The simplest would be for you to become my wife. Publicly, officially. It would legitimize Isla immediately, cement her place in the family, and send a very clear message about what happens to anyone who threatens either of you. Lena's laugh was sharp and bitter. You want me to marry you, after everything. I'm not asking what I want. I'm telling you what would be strategically optimal. Adrian's expression was unreadable. But I'm not going to force you into it. Marriage is an option, not a requirement. What are the other options? You could remain at the estate as Isla's mother. Separate household, separate life. I would provide for you both, ensure your safety, be involved in her upbringing. We would be civil co-parents, nothing more. And you'd be fine with that? Just civil co-parents? Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What I'm fine with is irrelevant. What matters is what works best for Isla and what you can tolerate long-term. Lena studied his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the hidden angle, but his expression remained neutral, almost carefully blank. You're actually giving me a choice, she said slowly. I'm giving you the choices available within reality, Adrian corrected. You can't choose to return to this life, running and hiding. That's not safe for Isla. You can't choose to cut me out entirely. She's my daughter, and I will be part of her life. But within those parameters, yes, you have choices. Isla finished nursing and fell asleep against Lena's chest, milk-drunk and boneless. Lena held her, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her own, and tried to process this new version of Adrian. The man she'd known in Chicago had been charming and intense and utterly certain of his own rightness. This man, this careful, measured negotiator, was someone different. Why are you being reasonable? Lena asked quietly. Because I've had 7 months to think about what I did wrong. Adrian's voice was low, almost rough. 7 months to understand why you ran, and I realized that control doesn't work with you, Lena. Force doesn't work. You're not the kind of woman who bends to pressure. So this is a new strategy. This is me learning from my mistakes. Lena wanted to believe it was that simple, but she'd learned enough about Adrian's world to know that nothing was ever simple. What do you get out of this? She asked. Out of being reasonable and giving me choices? Adrian leaned back in the chair, his expression thoughtful. I get to be in my daughter's life. I get to keep you both safe. And I get the possibility, not the guarantee, but the possibility that someday you might stop looking at me like I'm a monster. The honesty of it caught Lena off guard. She opened her mouth to respond, but the door opened before she could speak. A woman entered, tall, elegant, probably in her early 60s, with perfectly styled silver hair and the kind of bone structure that suggested she'd been stunning in her youth. She wore a tailored dress in deep burgundy and carried herself with the unconscious authority of someone who'd never had to demand respect. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, her voice cultured and warm. Adrian stood immediately. Mother, I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon. Mother. Lena felt her entire body tense. The woman's eyes moved to Lena, then to the baby in her arms, and her expression softened in a way that looked entirely genuine. I couldn't wait, she said simply. Adrian called yesterday and told me I had a granddaughter. Did you really think I would stay away? Adrian made introductions with careful formality. Lena, this is my mother, Victoria Falcone. Mother, this is Lena Moore. And this, his voice changed, warming in a way Lena had never heard before, is Isla. Victoria moved closer to the bed, her movements graceful and unhurried. May I? She asked, gesturing to the chair Adrian had vacated. Lena nodded, unsure what else to do. Victoria sat and looked at Isla with undisguised wonder. Oh, she breathed. Oh, Adrian, she's perfect. She is, Adrian agreed, and Lena heard the pride in his voice. The ownership. She has your mouth, Victoria continued, clearly addressing Lena now. And what beautiful coloring. How was your labor, dear? Adrian said it was quite long. The shift from grandmother to concerned woman happened so naturally that Lena found herself answering before she'd consciously decided to. 40 hours, but she's healthy. That's what matters. 40 hours, Victoria repeated, her expression sympathetic. You poor thing, and here you are, having to deal with my son appearing out of nowhere. I can only imagine what a shock that must have been. Lena glanced at Adrian, who was watching the exchange with wary interest. It was unexpected, Lena said carefully. I'm sure it was. Victoria's smile was knowing. Adrian has many strengths, but subtlety isn't always among them. She turned to her son. Would you mind giving us a few minutes? I'd like to speak with Lena privately. Adrian's expression tightened. Mother, Adrian. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. A few minutes, please. For a moment, Lena thought he would refuse, but then he nodded curtly and left the room, closing the door with exaggerated care. The silence that followed was surprisingly comfortable. Victoria continued to gaze at Isla, her expression soft. I'm not here to pressure you, she said finally, or to tell you what my son wants you to hear. I'm here because that baby is my granddaughter, and I wanted to meet her. And you. Adrian told you I ran away, Lena said. It wasn't a question. He did. He also told me why. Victoria's eyes met hers. My son is brilliant in many ways, Lena, but he was raised in a world where control equals safety, where trust is a liability, where the only way to protect what you love is to own it completely. She paused. He learned those lessons from his father, and it's taken him a long time to understand that not all of them are true. Is that supposed to make me feel better about him stalking me for 7 months? No, Victoria said bluntly. It's supposed to give you context, not forgiveness. Context. She shifted in her chair. I won't pretend my son handled this well. He didn't. But I also know that when he told me you were pregnant and missing, the fear in his voice was real. He wasn't angry, Lena. He was terrified. Lena looked down at Isla, processing this. Terrified of what? That something would happen to you, that you'd be hurt, or worse, and he wouldn't be there to prevent it, that his enemies would find you before he did. Victoria's voice was steady. Adrian has spent his entire adult life controlling every variable, managing every risk. And suddenly, the two people who mattered most were completely beyond his control. It nearly broke him. He seems pretty controlled to me, Lena said. Yes, well, that's his armor. Victoria smiled sadly. But I'm his mother. I saw him those first few weeks after you left. I watched him work 20-hour days because he couldn't sleep. Watched him tear apart his entire organization trying to find you. Watched him become someone I barely recognized. Lena didn't want to feel sympathy. Didn't want to imagine Adrian suffering. It was easier to keep him as a villain in her mind. Easier to justify her hatred. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I think you deserve to know the man you're making decisions about. Victoria reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and gently touched Isla's hand. The baby's fingers curled reflexively around her grandmother's finger. And because I want you to know that if you choose to be part of this family, you won't be alone with him. I'm here. And I promise you, I won't let my son repeat his father's mistakes. What mistakes were those? Victoria's expression darkened. He loved my mother, but he never saw her as an equal. Never gave her choices. Never asked what she wanted. She looked at Lena directly. She died when Adrian was 12, and I've often wondered if she might have lived longer if she'd been less trapped. The weight of that confession hung in the air. I'm sorry, Lena said quietly. So am I. Victoria stood gracefully. But I'm not going to let history repeat itself. If you come to the estate, and I hope you will for Isla's sake, you'll have an ally in me. Someone who understands what it's like to love a Falcone man while also needing to be your own person. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, dear. Adrian told you that you have choices. I want you to know that's true. I'll make sure it stays true. Then she was gone, leaving Lena alone with her sleeping daughter and 1,000 new questions. Adrian returned 5 minutes later, 2 fresh cups of coffee in hand. Well? He asked. Well, what? What did she say? Lena accepted the coffee, noting that this one had cream already added. He'd been paying attention earlier. That's between me and your mother. Adrian's expression suggested he wanted to press, but he simply nodded and reclaimed his chair. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds Isla's soft breathing and the distant beep of hospital machinery. It was almost peaceful, almost normal. When would we leave? Lena asked finally. The doctors want to keep you another 24 hours, so tomorrow afternoon. Adrian's voice was carefully neutral. I've arranged for a private medical transport. The estate has a fully equipped medical suite and a staff physician on call. You'll have everything you need. Of course you have, Lena muttered. I've had 7 months to plan, Lena. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. She looked at him then, really looked at him, saw the shadows under his eyes that suggested his sleep hadn't been peaceful, saw the tension in his shoulders that his expensive suit couldn't quite hide, saw the way his gaze kept drifting to Isla, hungry and wondering and almost vulnerable. You can hold her, Lena heard herself say. If you want. Adrian's entire body went still. You're sure? No, but you're her father. And if we're doing this, if we're really going to try to make this work, then you should hold your daughter. Adrian moved slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. He stood next to the bed, and Lena shifted Isla in her arms, preparing to hand her over. Support her head, Lena instructed, her voice sharper than she intended. And her neck. She can't. I know, Adrian said softly. I've been reading. Of course he had. Lena transferred Isla into his arms, watching his hands position themselves with surprising competence. He cradled the baby against his chest, one hand under her head, the other supporting her tiny body, and looked down at her with an expression Lena had never seen on his face before, complete and utter awe. Hello, Isla, he whispered. I'm your father. Isla slept on, oblivious to the enormity of the moment, but Lena felt something crack in her chest, something that had been holding tight against Adrian since the moment he'd walked into this room. He wasn't performing, he wasn't calculating, he was simply a man meeting his daughter for the first time, and the raw emotion on his face was impossible to fake. She's so small, he said, wonder threading through his voice. The book said 8 pounds was average, but she feels fragile, Lena supplied. Yes. Adrian's arms tightened fractionally, protective. How do you do this? How do you take care of something so fragile and not break it? Very carefully, and with a lot of fear that you're doing it wrong. Adrian looked up at her, and for just a moment, they weren't enemies or captor and captive or even ex-lovers. They were just 2 terrified people trying to figure out how to keep a tiny human alive. I don't know how to be a father, Adrian admitted quietly. I don't know how to be a mother. Then I guess we'll figure it out together. The word should have felt like a threat, like another move in his game of control. But watching him hold Isla with such careful reverence, Lena found herself wanting to believe they might actually be true. The moment broke when Isla woke, her face scrunching in preparation for a wail. Adrian looked panicked, and despite everything, Lena almost smiled. She's hungry, Lena said. I need to feed her. Adrian handed Isla back with visible reluctance, then retreated to his chair while Lena nursed. The silence this time felt different, less hostile, more contemplative. My mother likes you, Adrian said eventually. She doesn't know me. She knows enough. Victoria Falcone is an excellent judge of character. If she didn't think you were worthy of being Isla's mother, you'd know. Lena processed this. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest. Adrian leaned forward. I know you don't trust me. I know you have every reason not to. But my mother is different. She has no agenda except Isla's well-being. If you need someone to talk to, someone who understands what it's like to navigate this world without being blind to its dangers, talk to her. You're trying to win me over through your mother? I'm trying to give you allies, Adrian corrected, because you're going to need them. And because I'm self-aware enough to know I'm not always going to be the person you want to turn to. Isla finished eating and promptly spit up on Lena's hospital gown. Lena grabbed for the burp cloth, trying to clean the mess while simultaneously keeping Isla from crying. Adrian stood immediately, grabbing a handful of tissues from the box by the bed and helping without being asked. It was such a small thing, such a domestic, ordinary gesture, but it made something in Lena's chest tighten with an emotion she didn't want to name. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome." They cleaned up together in silence, and when Isla was finally settled and clean, Lena laid her back in the bassinet. She was suddenly exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from emotional upheaval on top of physical recovery. "You should rest," Adrian said, reading her accurately. "I'll stay. If you need anything, you don't have to stay." "I want to." Lena looked at him, this dangerous man who'd tracked her across state lines and threatened her into compliance, who was now offering to sit vigil while she slept simply because he wanted to be near his daughter. The contradictions were giving her whiplash. "Fine," she said, too tired to argue. "But if you wake the baby, I'm throwing you out." Adrian's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Understood." Lena lay back against the pillows and closed her eyes. She expected to lie awake, too aware of Adrian's presence, actually sleep, but exhaustion won, pulling her under within minutes. She woke hours later to the sound of low voices. For a moment she was disoriented. Then she remembered where she was, why Adrian was there. She kept her eyes closed, listening. "She's beautiful, Adrian." Victoria's voice, warm and proud. "Absolutely beautiful." "She is." Adrian sounded different talking to his mother, less guarded. "I held her, earlier. Lena let me hold her. And? And I'm terrified I'm going to fail her, that I'm going to do what Father did, love her so much that I suffocate her. The fact that you're aware of that possibility means you won't." Victoria's voice was gentle. "Your father never questioned himself, never thought he might be wrong. You're already different, darling." Silence, then. "She hates me, Mother. Lena. She looks at me like I'm the enemy." "Can you blame her?" "No." Adrian's voice was heavy. "No, I can't." "Then give her time, give her space. Show her through actions, not words, that you've changed, that you can be the partner she needs, not just the protector you think she requires." "What if time isn't enough? What if she never forgives me?" "Then you love your daughter and respect Lena's boundaries and accept that you can't control everything." Victoria paused. "Love isn't about ownership, Adrian. It's about trust, and trust has to be earned." Lena kept her breathing steady, feigning sleep, storing every word away to examine later. When she finally opened her eyes, Adrian was alone again, sitting in his chair, watching Isla sleep with an expression of fierce protectiveness. He noticed immediately when Lena stirred. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Sore, tired, overwhelmed." "Understandable." He stood, stretching slightly. "I should go. Let you rest properly. I'll be back in the morning." "Adrian." Lena's voice stopped him at the door. "Your mother said something about your father, about not repeating his mistakes." Adrian's expression shuddered. "My mother has strong opinions about my father." "Were they true? The things she said?" "Probably." Adrian's jaw was tight. "My father loved my mother completely, and it destroyed her because he never saw her as anything except something to possess, something to protect, something to control." He met Lena's eyes. "I swore I would never be like him. And then I met you, and I became exactly what I feared most." The honesty of it stole Lena's breath. "I'm trying to be different," Adrian continued quietly. "I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'm trying. For Isla. And..." He stopped, seemed to wrestle with something, then continued. "And for you. Because you deserve better than what I gave you before. He left before Lena could respond, the door clicking shut behind him. Lena lay in the darkness, listening to Isla's soft breathing, and tried to reconcile all the different versions of Adrian she'd encountered in the past 2 days. The stalker, the protector, the father, the son, the man trying desperately not to repeat his father's sins. She didn't know which version was real. Maybe they all were. The thought terrified her almost as much as the realization that she was starting to see him as human again, flawed and complicated, and capable of change. Because hating him had been simple, understanding him was going to be infinitely more dangerous. The medical transport turned out to be a private ambulance equipped with technology that probably cost more than most people's houses. Lena sat in the back with Isla secured in a car seat that Adrian had somehow procured overnight, complete with all the safety certifications and a base that locked into place with military precision. A nurse Adrian had hired sat nearby, monitoring both Lena and the baby with professional efficiency. Lena watched the Kentucky landscape give way to Tennessee, then gradually to Virginia as they headed north. She'd been discharged that morning with strict instructions about rest and recovery, and a follow-up appointment scheduled with a physician Adrian assured her was the best in New York. Everything had been arranged, everything had been controlled. She should have felt trapped. Instead, she mostly felt numb. Victoria had come by early that morning with coffee and pastries from somewhere that definitely wasn't local, sitting with Lena while Adrian handled the discharge paperwork. They talked about nothing important: the weather, Isla's sleeping patterns, the challenges of breastfeeding. Normal things, safe things. But beneath the pleasant conversation, Lena had sensed Victoria watching her, assessing, making judgments that would shape how the older woman chose to proceed. "You're stronger than you think," Victoria had said as she was leaving, her hand briefly touching Lena's shoulder. "Don't let anyone, including my son, convince you otherwise." Now watching the miles disappear beneath expensive wheels, Lena wondered if strength would be enough. Isla slept through most of the journey, waking only to eat. The nurse had offered to help, but Lena refused every time, needing the concrete task of caring for her daughter to anchor her. Without Isla to focus on, her mind spun in endless circles. What she was doing, where she was going, what kind of life she was building for her child in the arms of a man she'd once run from in terror. Adrian rode in a separate vehicle. Lena had seen him briefly before they'd left, dressed in another immaculate suit, his expression carefully neutral as he'd checked that she had everything she needed. He hadn't tried to ride with her, hadn't insisted on proximity, just ensured she was comfortable and then given her space. She didn't know if that made things better or worse. They stopped once at a rest area somewhere in Pennsylvania. Adrian appeared immediately when the ambulance pulled over, opening the door himself rather than waiting for the driver. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Fine," Lena said automatically. "How much longer?" 3 hours, maybe less." He glanced at Isla, something softening in his expression. "Is she doing all right?" "She's perfect." The nurse excused herself to use the facilities, leaving them alone in the back of the ambulance. The silence stretched, awkward, and waited. "The estate has been prepared for you," Adrian said finally. "I've had the entire east wing converted into a private suite, nursery adjacent to the master bedroom, full bathroom, sitting room, everything you should need." "East wing," Lena repeated. "How big is this place?" "Big enough for privacy." Adrian's hands were in his pockets, his posture deceptively casual. "You won't feel crowded, I promise." "And where will you be?" "West wing, unless you need me closer." Lena processed this. Separate wings, separate lives under the same roof. It was more than she'd expected, which somehow made her more suspicious. "What's the catch?" she asked. Adrian's expression flickered. "There's no catch, Lena. I told you, you have choices. This is me respecting the one you made. The choice you forced me into." "Yes," he acknowledged quietly, "but I'm trying to make it as bearable as possible." A family walked past the ambulance. Mother, father, 2 kids arguing about something inconsequential. Normal people living normal lives. Lena watched them with something that felt dangerously close to envy. "I had a life planned," she said, not looking at Adrian, "before all this. I was going to stay in Kentucky, find a small apartment, get a job at the county library. They'd already said they'd hire me once I recovered from giving birth. Raise Isla somewhere quiet and safe and mine. I know, Adrian said. You took that from me. I know that too. His voice was rough. And if there were any way at all to keep you both safe without taking your freedom, I would choose it. But there isn't. My world doesn't allow for that kind of separation. Lena finally looked at him. Do you ever regret it? Your world? The choices you made that led you here? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. Every day, he said finally, but regret doesn't change reality. I am what I am, Lena, and Isla is who she is because of that. The only question now is how we move forward. The nurse returned before Lena could respond, and Adrian stepped back, letting the professionals take over. But as they pulled back onto the highway, Lena found herself thinking about his answer. Every day. She hadn't expected honesty, hadn't expected him to admit to regret at all. The Adrian she'd known in Chicago had been utterly certain of himself, convinced that every choice he made was the right one, the only one. This version, this careful, measured man who acknowledged his mistakes, was disorienting. It would be easier if he stayed a villain. If he remained the controlling monster she'd built him into during her months of running, but he kept showing her glimpses of something else, something more complicated. And Lena didn't know what to do with complicated. They arrived at the estate as the sun was beginning to set. Lena's first glimpse came through the ambulance window. A long driveway lined with old-growth trees, perfectly manicured lawns stretching in every direction, and finally a house that looked more like a manor from a period drama than an actual residence. You've got to be kidding me, she muttered. The nurse smiled. It's impressive, isn't it? I've worked for Mr. Falcone before. His properties are always stunning. Lena didn't want to be impressed, didn't want to acknowledge that the sweeping architecture and obvious wealth on display were breathtaking. But as the ambulance pulled up to the main entrance, she couldn't help staring. Adrian was already there, having somehow arrived ahead of them, despite leaving after they did. He opened the ambulance door himself, his eyes going to Lena first, then to Isla. Welcome home, he said quietly. Home. The word made Lena's stomach clench. A small army of staff appeared, not crowding, but ready to help. A woman in her 50s with a kind face took charge immediately, introducing herself as Margaret, the household manager. We've prepared everything exactly as Mr. Falcone specified, Margaret said warmly. But if there's anything you need changed, you just let me know. This is your home now, and we want you comfortable. Lena let herself be ushered inside, Isla still sleeping in her carrier. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. High ceilings, beautiful moldings, artwork that probably belonged in museums. But it was also surprisingly warm. Someone had filled the main hall with fresh flowers. Soft music played from hidden speakers. The lighting was gentle, welcoming. Adrian had prepared this for her, had thought about what might make her comfortable. The realization was almost harder to bear than open hostility would have been. Your suite is this way, Margaret said, leading them toward a grand staircase. We have an elevator as well, if you'd prefer. Mr. Falcone mentioned you're still recovering. The elevator, Lena admitted. Her body was screaming after hours in the ambulance, the stitches pulling with every step. Adrian appeared at her elbow. Let me take her, he said, gesturing to Isla's carrier. Lena's hands tightened on the handle automatically, but the rational part of her brain recognized she was being stubborn for the sake of stubbornness. She released her grip, letting Adrian lift the carrier with careful hands. The elevator was old-fashioned but immaculately maintained, barely large enough for the three of them, plus Margaret. Lena found herself pressed against Adrian's side, close enough to smell his cologne, the same one he'd always worn, familiar and devastating. She edged away as much as the small space allowed. The doors opened onto a hallway lined with more artwork and thick carpet that muffled their footsteps. Margaret led them to a set of double doors at the end. The East Wing, she announced, pushing the doors open with a flourish. Lena stepped inside and stopped. The suite was beautiful, not in the overwhelming, ostentatious way she'd feared, but in a way that felt almost personal. Soft grays and creams, comfortable furniture that looked lived in rather than decorative, windows that overlooked gardens she could just make out in the fading light. There were books on the shelves, not leather-bound collections for show, but actual books with creased spines and dog-eared pages. And through an open doorway, she could see the nursery. "I'll let you get settled," Margaret said. "Dinner will be ready whenever you'd like. Just ring. There's a panel by the door. And if you need anything at all, day or night, we're here." She disappeared with professional discretion, leaving Lena alone with Adrian and Isla. Adrian set the carrier down gently and straightened. "The nursery has everything the pediatrician recommended. If something's missing, we can get it immediately. There's a private physician on call, Dr. Sarah Chen. She specializes in postpartum care and pediatrics. She'll come by tomorrow to check on you both, unless you'd rather wait." Lena walked to the nursery door and looked in. A crib with impossibly soft bedding, a changing table stocked with every supply imaginable, a rocking chair positioned by the window, a mobile hanging above the crib with delicate stars and moons. Everything perfect, everything controlled. "When did you do all this?" she asked. "I've been working on it for months." Adrian remained in the doorway, not entering the nursery without invitation. "Since I found out you were pregnant, I didn't know if you'd ever see it, but I wanted it ready, just in case." Lena turned to face him. "You prepared a nursery for a baby you'd never met in a house I'd never agreed to live in." "Yes." "That's insane." "Probably." Adrian's expression was unreadable. "But hope makes people do insane things." "Hope," Lena repeated. "You call this hope? What would you call it?" Lena didn't have an answer. She turned back to the nursery, taking in all the careful details. Someone had painted clouds on the ceiling. Someone had chosen books for the shelf that were age-appropriate and diverse. Someone had thought about what a child would need, not just now, but in the months and years to come. "I should let you rest," Adrian said. "You've had a long day." "Wait." Lena's voice stopped him. "The books. In the other room. Did you choose those?" "Some of them. My mother helped with others. She said—" He paused. "She said you'd need your own things. Not just things for Isla, things that were yours." Lena felt something crack in her chest again. "Thank you," she said quietly. Adrian nodded and left without another word. Alone in the suite, Lena lifted Isla from the carrier and held her close. The baby was starting to wake, her face scrunching in preparation for crying. Lena sat in the rocking chair, which was exactly the right height, exactly the right comfort level, and began to nurse. Through the window, she could see the ground stretching into darkness. 40 acres, Adrian had said. 40 acres of beautiful prison. But as she looked around the nursery, at the care that had gone into every detail, the thought behind every choice, she found herself wondering if prison was the right word after all. The next morning brought Dr. Chen, who was everything Adrian had promised, competent, warm, respectful of Lena's privacy, while being thorough in her examination. She pronounced both Lena and Isla healthy, gave instructions for continued recovery, and left her personal number. "Call any time," she said. "Day or night, mister. Falcone has made it very clear that you and Isla are the priority." After she left, Lena explored the suite more thoroughly. The bathroom was enormous, with a tub deep enough to actually soak in, and a shower with enough shower heads to qualify as excessive. The closet held clothes in her exact size, casual, comfortable things, not the designer pieces she might have expected. Someone had paid attention to what she actually wore, not what they thought she should wear. The books on the shelf ranged from literary fiction to mysteries to parenting guides. The desk by the window was stocked with good paper and expensive pens. Someone had even included a journal, the leather cover soft and unmarked. It was like Adrian had tried to recreate everything she might have had in her imagined Kentucky apartment, except with unlimited resources. The thought should have made her angry. Instead, it just made her tired. Victoria arrived after lunch, knocking softly before entering with the careful courtesy of someone respecting boundaries. "How are you settling in?" she asked, immediately gravitating to Isla, who was awake and alert in Lena's arms. "It's—" Lena searched for words. "It's a lot." "I imagine it is." Victoria settled into one of the comfortable chairs. "May I hold her?" Lena handed Isla over, watching as Victoria cradled her granddaughter with the easy competence of someone who'd done this before. "She looks like Adrian did as a baby," Victoria murmured. Same serious expression, same way of studying everything. "Does she?" Lena hadn't seen baby pictures of Adrian, hadn't thought to ask. I brought albums, Victoria said, gesturing to a bag Lena hadn't noticed. Thought you might like to see, know who your daughter comes from. They spent the afternoon looking through photos. Adrian as a baby, solemn and watchful. Adrian as a child, already showing signs of the intensity that would define him. Adrian as a teenager, growing into the face Lena knew. And then photos of a man Lena assumed was his father, same build, same coloring, but with eyes that held something colder than anything she'd ever seen in Adrian's face. Thomas Falcone, Victoria said, her voice carefully neutral. Adrian's father, my husband. Adrian said you have strong opinions about him. Victoria's smile was sad. I loved him. That's what made it so terrible. He loved me too, in his way. But he never saw me as separate from himself, never understood that love doesn't mean ownership. She looked at Lena directly. Adrian is trying very hard not to make the same mistakes. I hope you'll give him the chance to prove it. Why do you care? Lena asked. If he hurt me before, if he forced me here, why are you on his side? I'm not on his side, Victoria said gently. I'm on Isla's side. And Isla needs both her parents to figure out how to coexist, even if they can never be together the way Adrian might wish. She paused. But I'm also a mother who watched her son destroy himself for 7 months thinking he'd lost you, who saw him become someone I barely recognized, and who's now watching him try desperately to be better. That's worth something, Lena. Not forgiveness necessarily, but acknowledgement. Isla began to fuss, and Lena took her back, settling into the familiar routine of feeding and soothing. Victoria watched with the fond attention of a grandmother. He hasn't asked to see her today, Lena said quietly. I thought he'd be here constantly. He's giving you space. I told him to. Victoria's expression was knowing. Adrian's instinct is to be present for everything, to control every variable, but I reminded him that smothering you would only push you away. So he's trying to be patient. Is he still watching, even here? The estate has security, if that's what you mean, but Adrian isn't monitoring your movements or listening to your conversations. He's in the West Wing, working, probably going out of his mind wanting to check on you, but respecting the boundaries you set. Victoria stood, smoothing her elegant dress. You should know, Lena, you have more power here than you think. Adrian will do almost anything to keep you comfortable, to keep you here. Use that leverage. Test those boundaries. See what happens when you push. After Victoria left, Lena thought about those words. Test the boundaries. See what happens when you push. That evening, after Isla was asleep in the beautiful nursery, Lena made a decision. She rang for Margaret. I'd like to have dinner in the main dining room, she said, and I'd like Mr. Falcone to join me. Margaret's expression didn't change, but Lena thought she saw approval in the older woman's eyes. Of course. I'll let him know. 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock. At 6:45, Lena stood in her closet trying to decide what to wear. Everything fit perfectly, which was somehow worse than if things had been wrong. She chose simple black pants and a soft sweater, comfortable but put together. Not trying too hard. Not giving him anything. She brought the baby monitor with her, unwilling to be separated from Isla even by the distance of a few rooms. The main dining room turned out to be exactly as overwhelming as she'd feared. Long table, chandelier, more silverware than any human could possibly need. Adrian was already there, standing by the window in dark slacks and a white shirt, no tie. He looked up when she entered, and something crossed his face too quickly for her to identify. Lena, he said. I wasn't expecting... Margaret said you wanted to eat together? I did. Lena moved to the table, noting that places had been set at one end, close, but not intimately so. Is that all right? Of course. Adrian held out her chair, the gesture automatic. I'm glad you're comfortable enough to leave your suite. I'm not comfortable, Lena said bluntly, but I'm not going to hide either. This is my life now, apparently. I might as well start living in it. Adrian took his own seat, and staff appeared immediately with the first course. The food was excellent, of course it was. But Lena barely tasted it. She was too busy watching Adrian, looking for cracks in his composure. Your mother came by, she said. She showed me pictures. Did she? Adrian's expression was carefully neutral. I hope she wasn't too overwhelming. She was kind and honest. She said I should test my boundaries here, see what happens when I push. Adrian's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. That sounds like my mother. So I'm testing, Lena continued. I want to go into town, tomorrow, just to see it, to know where I am. Adrian set down his fork carefully. With security. With security, Lena agreed. I'm not stupid, Adrian. I understand the reality, but I need to see something beyond these walls, even if it's just for an hour. All right, Lena blinked. All right? Just like that? You're not a prisoner, Lena. I told you that. If you want to go into town, we'll arrange it. Adrian's expression was serious. I appreciate you telling me rather than just leaving. That's a good sign. A sign of what? That you're willing to work within the parameters we've established. That you're not just looking for ways to run. He paused. Are you looking for ways to run? Lena considered lying, considered keeping her cards close. But Victoria's words echoed in her mind. Test the boundaries. See what happens. I don't know, she said honestly. Part of me wants to take Isla and disappear the first chance I get. But part of me knows that's not realistic anymore. That you'd find us. That running would just make everything worse. She met his eyes. So I'm trying to figure out how to live with this. With you. With all of it. Adrian nodded slowly. That's fair. And honest. Thank you. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the clink of silverware the only sound. Then Adrian spoke again, his voice quieter. I know you don't trust me. I know you probably never will, not completely. But I want you to know that everything I'm doing, the space, the boundaries, the choices, it's real. I'm not trying to manipulate you into caring about me. I'm trying to give you a life you can tolerate while keeping you and Isla safe. What if I never want more than tolerance? Lena asked. What if I live here for years and still hate you? Then you live here for years and hate me, Adrian said simply, and I accept that as the price of my mistakes. He looked at her directly. I'd rather have you hate me under my protection than love me and be dead because I wasn't there to keep you safe. The stark honesty of it stole Lena's breath. She wanted to argue, to push back, to insist he was being dramatic. But she'd seen enough of his world to know he wasn't exaggerating. Your enemies, she said carefully. The ones you're so worried about. Who are they? Adrian's expression darkened. People I've crossed in business. Rival organizations who see me as a threat. Former allies who became enemies when I consolidated power. He paused. My world is built on violence, Lena. I've tried to minimize it, to be strategic rather than brutal. But violence is still the foundation, and people remember. They wait for weakness. And a child, his voice roughened. A child is the ultimate weakness. Then maybe you should have thought about that before having one. I didn't plan Isla, Adrian said. Neither of us did. But she exists, and I will do whatever it takes to ensure she survives in a world that would see her as leverage against me. Lena thought about Isla, sleeping peacefully upstairs, utterly unaware of the danger her very existence represented. How long? She asked. How long before it's safe? I don't know. Months, maybe? I'm working on restructuring some things, making it clear that certain lines can't be crossed, building alliances that will protect her even if something happens to me. Adrian's hands clenched briefly, but these things take time and caution. And in the meantime, we live here, in this beautiful cage. In this beautiful cage, Adrian agreed. There was no apology in his voice, just acceptance of reality. They finished dinner with careful conversation about neutral things, Isla's feeding schedule, Dr. Chen's recommendations, the gardens that Lena might enjoy exploring. When the meal ended, Adrian walked her back to the elevator. Thank you for dinner, he said, for giving me a chance to explain. I know it doesn't change anything, but it changes some things, Lena interrupted. Not everything, not enough, but some things. She stepped into the elevator before he could respond, watching his face as the doors closed between them. He looked hopeful and sad and resigned all at once. Back in her suite, Lena checked on Isla, still sleeping soundly, and then stood at the window looking out over the dark grounds. Somewhere out there was a world she used to belong to, a life she'd imagined, A future that didn't include Adrian Falcone or his dangerous legacy. But that future was gone now. Had been gone the moment she'd decided to keep the baby. The moment she'd chosen love over freedom. Now she had to figure out how to build something new. Something that kept Isla safe while allowing Lena to remain herself. Something that existed in the impossible space between captivity and partnership. She didn't know if it was possible, but for her daughter, she would try. The trip into town happened 3 days later, after Adrian had arranged security protocols that seemed excessive even by his standards. 2 SUVs, 4 guards who tried very hard to look like they weren't guards, and a carefully mapped route that avoided anywhere Adrian deemed potentially problematic. Lena dressed Isla in a simple onesie and wrapped her in a soft blanket, then stood in front of her closet trying to decide what one wore to venture outside a gilded cage for the first time. She settled on jeans and a sweater, pulling her hair back in a ponytail that made her look younger than her years. Margaret had arranged for a car seat to be installed, and one of the guards, a woman named Sarah, who had kind eyes and capable hands, helped Lena secure Isla properly. Adrian stood nearby, not interfering but clearly struggling with the urge to supervise every detail. "The town is small," he said as Lena settled into the back seat. "About 15,000 people. There's a main street with shops, a library, a few restaurants. Sarah knows where everything is. She'll stay with you." "I know," Lena said. "We went over this already." "I know we did. I'm just—" Adrian stopped, his jaw tightening. "Be safe." "We're going to the library, Adrian, not a war zone." "Everywhere is a war zone if you're not careful." Lena wanted to snap at him, to tell him he was being paranoid, but when she looked at his face, at the genuine fear lurking beneath the controlled exterior, she found herself softening despite her best intentions. "We'll be fine," she said quietly. "I promise to be careful." The drive took 20 minutes through countryside that was genuinely beautiful. Rolling hills, old farmhouses, the kind of landscape that belonged on postcards. The town itself was exactly as Adrian had described, small, quiet, with a main street that looked like it hadn't changed much since the 1950s. Sarah parked in front of the library, a modest brick building with flower boxes in the windows. "Take your time," she said. "I'll be right here if you need anything." Lena lifted Isla's carrier and stepped out into fresh air that smelled like freedom. It was a beautiful autumn day, the kind that made her chest ache with memories of what her life was supposed to be. She was supposed to be here as a local, not as a wealthy man's kept woman. She was supposed to belong. The library was nearly empty on a Thursday afternoon. An older woman at the circulation desk looked up with a welcoming smile. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. "Just browsing," Lena said. "Is it all right if I bring the baby in?" "Of course. How old?" "Almost 2 weeks." The woman's face softened. "Oh, congratulations. First one?" "Yes." "They're a blessing. Exhausting, but a blessing." She gestured around the small space. "We've got a decent parenting section if you need any resources. And story time on Saturdays, though she's a bit young for that yet." Lena thanked her and wandered through the stacks, Isla sleeping peacefully in her carrier. The library was exactly the kind of place she'd imagined working in. Cozy, worn, full of books that people actually read rather than collected for status. She found the parenting section and pulled a few titles, then moved to the fiction shelves. She was reading the back cover of a mystery novel when she heard a familiar voice. "I thought I might find you here." Lena turned to find Adrian standing in the doorway, looking completely out of place in his expensive clothes and urban sophistication. The librarian was staring at him with undisguised interest. "What are you doing here?" Lena asked, keeping her voice low. "I wanted to see what you thought of the town." Adrian moved closer, his eyes on Isla. "And I couldn't stay away. I tried. I lasted almost an hour before I had to follow." "Adrian," Lena's voice held warning, "you said I could have space." "You have space. I'm here, in case you need anything." He looked almost sheepish, which was so unlike him that Lena didn't know how to respond. "This is not space," she said. "This is hovering. I know. I'm sorry. I'll go." But he didn't move. Instead, he looked around the library with genuine interest. "This is nice. Quieter than I expected." Despite herself, Lena felt a small smile tugging at her lips. "You've never been in a small-town library before, have you?" No, Adrian admitted. My experience with libraries tends toward university research facilities and private collections. Of course it does. Lena shifted Isla's carrier to her other arm. Well, this is what normal people do. We go to libraries, we browse, we check out books for free instead of buying first editions. I could buy you first editions, Adrian offered. The estate library could use updating anyway. That's not the point. Lena moved toward the mystery section. The point is being able to do something ordinary, something that's mine. Adrian was quiet for a moment, watching her scan the shelves. Then he spoke, his voice softer than before. I'm sorry, you're right. I'm hovering. It's just... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. I've spent 7 months imagining every terrible thing that could happen to you. And now that you're here, now that you're safe, my brain can't quite accept it, can't stop running scenarios. Lena looked at him, really looked at him, saw the tension in his shoulders, the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands kept clenching and unclenching at his sides. He wasn't trying to control her. He was genuinely terrified. Nothing is going to happen to us at the library, she said gently. I know that. Logically, I know that. But logic and fear don't always align. The librarian appeared at the end of the aisle, clearly trying not to stare. Do you folks need any help finding anything? No, thank you, Lena said. Then, surprising herself, she gestured to Adrian. This is my... She stopped, unsure what to call him. Partner? Captor? The father of her child? Adrian, he supplied smoothly, extending his hand. I'm Isla's father. The librarian's eyes widened slightly. Oh, well, congratulations to you both. She's beautiful. After the librarian left, Lena turned to Adrian. You can stay, but you have to let me browse in peace. No hovering, no commentary, just exist quietly. Adrian nodded, relief washing over his features. I can do that. He couldn't, actually. For the next 20 minutes, he trailed behind her through the stacks, trying and mostly failing to appear casual. He picked up books at random, clearly not reading them. He watched everyone who came near them with barely concealed suspicion. When a teenager dropped a stack of textbooks with a loud crash, Adrian's hand went to his jacket, to where Lena suspected he kept a gun, before he caught himself. It should have been irritating. It was irritating, but it was also, in a strange way, almost endearing. This powerful, dangerous man reduced to a nervous wreck by the simple act of accompanying his daughter to a library. Lena selected 5 books and moved to the circulation desk to get a library card. The process was simple: proof of address, a form to fill out, a temporary card issued on the spot. What address should I use? She asked Adrian quietly. He pulled out his phone and showed her the estate's address. The librarian didn't even blink at the prestigious location, just copied it down efficiently. You're all set, she said, handing Lena the temporary card. These will be due back in 3 weeks. We can call if you'd like reminders. Walking out of the library with her new card and her stack of books, Lena felt something shift inside her. This small act, this normal, ordinary thing, made the situation feel fractionally more bearable. She wasn't just a prisoner in Adrian's house. She was a person with a library card, with books she'd chosen, with some tiny measure of autonomy. Thank you, she said to Adrian as they reached the car. For what? For letting me do this. For not making it into a bigger production than it needed to be. She paused. Even if you did follow me like a paranoid bodyguard. Adrian's lips twitched. I prefer concerned father. You were definitely paranoid. Can I be both? Sarah helped Lena get Isla secured in the car seat, and they drove back to the estate in comfortable silence. When they arrived, Adrian walked them to the elevator despite clearly having work waiting for him. I have a conference call in an hour, he said, but I was thinking, if you're comfortable with it, I'd like to spend some time with Isla later. Maybe help with her bath? Lena considered this. She'd been keeping Isla mostly to herself, protective and possessive in ways she knew weren't entirely healthy. But Adrian was trying, had been trying, consistently, for days now. And Isla deserved to know her father, even if Lena wasn't ready to forgive him. All right, she said. Come by around 7. I'll show you how to do it. The relief on Adrian's face was almost painful to witness. Thank you, Lena, really. That evening, Adrian appeared at exactly 7 o'clock, dressed in dark slacks and a simple shirt, looking more nervous than Lena had ever seen him. She'd laid out everything they needed in the nursery: baby tub, gentle soap, soft towels, fresh clothes. "It's not complicated," Lena said, undressing Isla gently. "But you have to support her head at all times, and the water can't be too hot. Test it with your elbow first." Adrian tested the water carefully, then watched as Lena demonstrated how to hold Isla securely while washing her. The baby kicked and squirmed, making small sounds of protest at the unfamiliar sensation. "Your turn," Lena said, lifting Isla from the water and wrapping her in a towel. What if I drop her?" "You won't drop her. Just support her head and keep a firm grip." Adrian took Isla with the same careful attention he brought to everything, his large hands gentle as he cradled her against his chest. The baby looked impossibly small in his arms, fragile and perfect and utterly dependent. "Hello, sweetheart," Adrian murmured, his voice softer than Lena had ever heard it. "Let's get you clean." He washed Isla with painstaking care, checking the water temperature obsessively, moving with glacial slowness to ensure he didn't startle her. When the baby began to cry, he looked panicked, until Lena reminded him that babies just cried sometimes. It didn't mean he was doing anything wrong. "She's fine," Lena said. "She just doesn't like being cold and wet. Finish up, and we'll get her dressed." Adrian rinsed Isla quickly and handed her to Lena for drying. Then he watched, clearly trying to memorize every step, as Lena dressed the baby in a fresh onesie and swaddled her snugly. "You make it look easy," Adrian said. "It's not easy. I'm just learning as I go, same as you." Lena settled into the rocking chair with Isla. "But you did well. She survived her first bath with Daddy." Adrian's expression at the word Daddy was complex, pleased and pained all at once. Would you mind if I stayed? Just for a little while?" Lena gestured to the second chair she'd had brought in. "Sit, but be quiet. She needs to settle before bed." Adrian sat, and they fell into silence, broken only by Isla's soft suckling sounds as she nursed. Through the window, Lena could see the sun setting over the gardens, painting everything gold and amber. It was peaceful in a way that made her chest ache. "I could get used to this," Adrian said quietly. "Don't." "Why not?" "Because this doesn't change anything between us. You can be Ila's father without being—" Lena stopped, searching for words. "Without us being anything more than two people raising a child together." "I know that." Adrian's voice was careful. "I'm not asking for more than you can give, Lena. I'm just acknowledging that this, sitting here, watching you with our daughter, it's more than I thought I'd ever have. I'm grateful for it." Lena didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They sat in comfortable silence until Isla fell asleep, and then Lena rose to put her in the crib. "I should go," Adrian said, standing as well. "Let you rest." But at the door he paused. "Lena, thank you for letting me be part of this, for not shutting me out completely. I know I don't deserve it." "No," Lena agreed. "You don't. But Isla deserves a father who's present, so I'm trying." After he left, Lena stood in the nursery doorway watching Isla sleep. The baby looked so peaceful, so utterly unconcerned with the complicated dynamics of her parents' relationship. In her world, all that mattered was being fed, being warm, being loved. Lena envied that simplicity. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that was almost comfortable. Mornings were Lena's, quiet time with Isla, breakfast in her suite, sometimes a walk through the gardens if the weather was nice. Afternoons brought visits from Victoria, who had taken to stopping by most days with books or small gifts or just company. Evenings were when Adrian appeared, always asking permission, always respectful of boundaries, to spend time with his daughter. He was learning Isla's patterns, her preferences, her moods, learning how to soothe her when she cried, how to hold her so she'd sleep, how to change a diaper without making a disaster of it. And Lena watched him learn, watched him transform from a dangerous criminal into a surprisingly competent father. It was disconcerting. 2 weeks after their arrival, Victoria invited Lena to lunch in the main house. Lena accepted, leaving Isla with Adrian, who looked terrified and thrilled in equal measure, and followed Victoria to a sun-filled room with windows overlooking a fountain. This was my favorite room when I lived here, Victoria said, settling into a chair. Before Thomas died and I moved to the city, I used to have tea here every afternoon. You lived here? Lena asked, surprised. For almost 30 years. This was the Falcone family estate long before Adrian made it his primary residence. Victoria smiled sadly. I have a lot of memories in these walls. Not all of them good, but enough good ones to make leaving difficult. Lunch was simple and delicious, served by staff who knew exactly when to appear and when to make themselves scarce. Lena found herself relaxing despite her intention to stay guarded. You're doing well, Victoria observed. Better than I expected, honestly. What were you expecting? More fighting, more resistance. Adrian said you were stubborn. I thought there'd be more conflict. Victoria's expression was knowing. Instead, you're adapting, finding ways to make this work. That takes strength, Lena. Or weakness, Lena said bitterly. Maybe I'm just giving up. There's a difference between giving up and making strategic choices. Victoria set down her fork. You're choosing to make the best of an impossible situation for your daughter's sake. That's not weakness, that's love. Lena's throat tightened. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Adrian to show his true colors again, to start making demands, imposing rules, taking away the small freedoms he's given me. And if he does, then I'll know I was right not to trust him. Victoria was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her water glass. Can I tell you something about my son? Something I've never told him? Lena nodded. When he was 8 years old, his father took him to one of his business meetings. A negotiation that went badly. There was violence. Nothing that directly threatened Adrian, but he saw it. Saw what his father was capable of. Victoria's voice was soft, distant. He came home that night and told me he never wanted to be like Thomas, that he was going to be different, better. I told him that was wonderful, that I was proud of him. She paused, her expression sad. But Thomas overheard, and he sat Adrian down and explained that being different, being soft, would get him killed in their world. That the only way to survive was to be harder than everyone else, more ruthless, more willing to do what needed to be done. Victoria met Lena's eyes. Adrian believed him. He spent the next 20 years becoming exactly what his father said he needed to be. And by the time he realized he hated what he'd become, he didn't know how to be anything else. Lena processed this, trying to reconcile the image of a gentle 8-year-old with the man who'd tracked her across state lines. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I think that scared little boy is still in there somewhere, still trying to figure out how to be different. And I think you might be the only person who can help him find that version of himself again. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm not even asking you to like him. But maybe, if you can, try to see him as more than just the monster you've made him into. He's complicated, Lena, just like we all are. A cry came through the baby monitor Lena had brought with her. Both women looked at it simultaneously. That's the I'm wet and offended about it cry, Lena said, standing. You can already tell the difference? Victoria asked, impressed. After 2 weeks of listening to nothing else, you develop an ear for it. They walked back to Lena's suite together, where they found Adrian pacing with Isla, looking genuinely distressed. I changed her, he said immediately when he saw Lena. And I fed her the bottle you left. But she won't stop crying. Lena took Isla and checked her diaper, indeed changed, and competently. She felt the baby's forehead, no fever, checked her clothing, nothing pinching or uncomfortable. Then she simply held Isla close, swaying gently, and the crying gradually subsided. What did I do wrong? Adrian asked, clearly frustrated with himself. Nothing, Lena said. Sometimes she just needs to cry it out, or sometimes she just wants comfort. There's no formula, Adrian. You just have to learn to read her. How long does that take? I don't know. I'm still learning too. Victoria watched this exchange with barely concealed pleasure, then excused herself with the excuse of an appointment. After she left, Adrian lingered in the doorway. I'm sorry, he said. I thought I could handle 2 hours alone with her. I didn't mean to. Adrian, Lena interrupted him gently. You did fine. She's fed, changed, and healthy. The fact that she cried doesn't mean you failed. It just means she's a baby and babies cry. I feel like I'm constantly failing. Welcome to parenthood. Lena settled into the rocking chair with Isla. It's basically just a series of small failures interspersed with moments where you accidentally do something right. Adrian's lips twitched. That's not very encouraging. It's honest. Lena looked at him directly. You're trying, Adrian. I can see that. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for. The compliment, if it could be called that, seemed to catch him off guard. Thank you, he said quietly. That means more than you know. He left shortly after, and Lena sat alone with Isla, thinking about Victoria's story. About the scared 8-year-old who'd tried to be different and been taught that different meant dead. About the man who'd spent 20 years becoming someone he hated. She didn't want to feel sympathy for Adrian, didn't want to understand him or see him as human. It was easier when he was just a villain, just a threat, just the man who'd taken her freedom. But understanding was creeping in despite her resistance. And with understanding came the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, he could actually change. That night, Lena dreamed of the library. But in the dream, she worked there, stamped books, helped patrons, lived a quiet life in a small town with Isla growing up surrounded by stories. Adrian appeared at the edge of the dream, watching but not interfering, and when she woke, she couldn't decide if his presence had been comforting or haunting. In the morning, she found a note slipped under her door. Adrian's precise handwriting, just 3 lines. I know this isn't the life you wanted. I know I'm not who you would have chosen, but I'm trying to give you whatever pieces of that life I can. Just tell me what you need. Lena held the note for a long time, Isla sleeping peacefully in her arms, and tried to figure out what she needed. Freedom was impossible. Forgiveness felt too far away. Trust seemed like a fantasy. But maybe she could accept partnership, the kind built not on love or passion, but on shared purpose and mutual respect, and the fierce determination to give their daughter the best life possible. It wasn't what she'd dreamed of. But as she looked around her beautiful suite, thought about the library card in her wallet, remembered Adrian's gentle hands bathing Isla the night before, she wondered if it might be enough. The turning point came on a Tuesday morning 6 weeks after their arrival at the estate. Lena woke to find Adrian standing in her doorway, his face drawn with tension she hadn't seen since those first days at the hospital. What's wrong? She asked immediately, her arms tightening around Isla, who was still asleep beside her. We need to talk, Adrian said. I'm downstairs. Victoria's already here. The formality in his voice sent ice through Lena's veins. What happened? Please, just get dressed and come down. I'll explain everything. He left before she could ask more questions, and Lena dressed quickly, her hands shaking as she changed Isla and gathered what she needed. Whatever had happened, it was serious enough to bring that look back to Adrian's face, the one that reminded her he was dangerous, that his world was violent, that her safety had always been conditional. She found them in Adrian's study, a room she'd never entered before. It was masculine and intimidating, all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and windows that overlooked the entire estate. Victoria sat in one of the chairs, her expression grave. Adrian stood by the window, his back rigid. Sit, Victoria said gently, gesturing to the chair beside her. Lena sat, holding Isla like a shield. Someone tell me what's going on. Adrian turned from the window, and Lena saw something in his eyes that terrified her. Not anger, not calculation, but genuine fear. One of my business associates discovered Isla's existence, he said without preamble. A man named Vincent Russo. He's been asking questions, making inquiries. And this morning his people were spotted in town, near the library. Lena's blood turned to ice. How did he find out? I don't know yet. I'm working on it. Adrian's jaw was tight. But the fact that he knows means others will know soon. The protection I was trying to build, the arrangements I was making, they're not ready. We're exposed. What does that mean? Lena asked, though she already knew the answer. It means we need to make a decision. Now. Today. Adrian moved closer, his expression intense. I can keep you safe, Lena, but only if you let me. Only if you stop fighting me on this. I haven't been fighting you, Lena protested. You've been keeping me at arm's length, refusing to let this become real, refusing to commit to being part of this family in any meaningful way. Adrian's voice was harsh, desperate. And I understand why. I do. But Vincent Russo doesn't care about your feelings or your autonomy. He only cares that you and Isla are leverage. And the only way to make you not leverage is to make it clear that you're not separate from me. That touching you means war. Lena looked at Victoria, searching for guidance. The older woman's expression was sad but resolute. He's right, Victoria said quietly. I wish he wasn't, but he is. As long as you remain Adrian's ex-girlfriend, the mother of his illegitimate child, you're vulnerable. But if you become his wife, publicly, officially, you gain the full protection of the Falcone name. So this is it, Lena said, her voice brittle. The ultimatum. Marry him, or risk Isla's safety. It's not an ultimatum, Adrian said, and Lena heard the pain in his voice. It's reality. I know you hate me for it. I know you'll probably always hate me. But I'm begging you, Lena. Let me protect you the only way I know how. Isla began to fuss, picking up on Lena's tension. Lena soothed her automatically, her mind racing. 6 weeks ago, she would have refused, would have fought this with everything she had, would have rather run again than give Adrian this victory. But 6 weeks of watching him be patient, of seeing him try, of witnessing the genuine terror he felt every time she left the estate with Isla. 6 weeks had changed something fundamental. What would it look like? She asked quietly. Adrian blinked, clearly not having expected the question. What? The marriage. What would it actually look like? What would you expect from me? Nothing different than what we have now, Adrian said immediately. Separate rooms, separate lives, you'd have complete autonomy over Isla's care and your own schedule. The only thing that would change is the legal documentation and the public perception. And you'd be fine with that. A marriage in name only? Adrian's expression was carefully controlled, but Lena saw something flicker in his eyes. Longing, maybe, or resignation. What I want doesn't matter. What matters is keeping you both safe. That's not an answer, Lena pressed. I need to know, Adrian. What do you want from this? The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Adrian spoke, his voice low and honest in a way that made Lena's chest tight. I want what I've always wanted. You, Lena, not as a possession or a trophy or something to control. Just you. Building a life together. Being partners in every sense. He met her eyes. But I know that's not possible. I know I destroyed any chance of that when I tracked you down and forced you here. So I'll take what I can get. Your safety, your presence in Isla's life, the illusion of family. It's more than I deserve. Victoria stood quietly. I'll give you two some privacy, she said, touching Lena's shoulder briefly before leaving. Alone with Adrian, Lena felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Everything had been building to this. Every careful boundary, every tentative step toward cooperation, every moment of watching him try to be better than what his world had made him. If I do this, Lena said slowly, I need something from you. Anything. I need the truth. About everything. About your business, about the dangers, about what our life will actually look like. No more managing me. No more deciding what I can and can't know to protect me. If I'm going to be your wife, even in name only, I need to understand exactly what that means. Adrian nodded. Fair. What do you want to know? Start with Vincent Russo. Who is he, and why does he care about Isla? Adrian moved to his desk, pulling out a file. Vincent Russo runs the Chicago operation that's been trying to push into my territory for the past 3 years. We've had an uneasy truce, but it's always been fragile. He's smart, ruthless, and very good at finding weaknesses. He handed her the file. 2 months ago, I declined a business partnership he proposed. He didn't take it well, and now he's looking for leverage. Lena opened the file, scanning photos and documents that painted a picture of a dangerous man. And if we're married, why would that stop him? Because it changes the calculation. Right now, you're an ex-girlfriend. Attacking you would be an insult, but not necessarily war. But if you're my wife, if you're a Falcone, then touching you becomes a direct attack on the family, on the legacy, on everything my father built and I've maintained. Adrian's voice was hard. Vincent knows what that means. He knows the response would be absolute and brutal. It's not about morality, Lena. It's about mathematics. The cost of attacking you would exceed any possible benefit. So I become untouchable by becoming your property, Lena said bitterly. By becoming family, Adrian corrected. There's a difference. Lena looked down at Isla, who had fallen back asleep, utterly peaceful and unaware of the adult machinations swirling around her. What would she tell her daughter someday about this choice? How would she explain that she'd married a man she didn't love, didn't trust, maybe couldn't ever forgive, just to keep her safe? But as she looked at Isla's perfect, innocent face, the answer became clear. She would tell her daughter the truth. That love came in many forms. That sometimes the strongest love meant making impossible choices. That protecting the people you cared about mattered more than pride or freedom or the fairy tale ending everyone was supposed to want. All right, Lena said quietly. I'll marry you. Adrian's entire body went still. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Lena met his eyes. For Isla, not for you, not for us, for her. I know, Adrian said, and there was such profound sadness in his voice that Lena almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Thank you, Lena. I know what this costs you. Do you? The question came out sharper than she intended. Do you really understand what you're asking me to give up? The last piece of myself that wasn't touched by you? The last choice that was supposed to be mine? Yes, Adrian said simply. I do. And I'm sorry. But I'd rather have you hate me and alive than love me and dead. The stark honesty of it stole whatever response Lena had been preparing. She stood, cradling Isla carefully. When? As soon as possible. This weekend, if you're willing. Small ceremony, just family and essential witnesses. We can do something larger later if you want, but right now speed matters more than spectacle. Fine. This weekend. Lena moved toward the door, then paused. Adrian? I meant what I said. I need complete honesty from now on. If there are threats, if there are problems, if anything changes, you tell me. Immediately. No protecting me from information. Deal? Deal, Adrian agreed. The next 3 days were a blur of preparations that Lena barely participated in. Victoria took charge with the efficiency of someone who'd planned weddings before, making decisions and consulting Lena only when absolutely necessary. A dress appeared in Lena's closet, simple, elegant, cream-colored rather than white. Appropriate for someone who'd already had a child out of wedlock, Victoria explained gently. Lena tried it on alone in her room and stared at herself in the mirror. She looked like a bride. She felt like a fraud. The ceremony was scheduled for Saturday afternoon in the estate's garden. The guest list was minimal: Victoria, Dr. Chen, Margaret, and a few key staff members, and 2 of Adrian's business associates who needed to witness it for political reasons. No one from Lena's old life, because that life had been erased the moment she'd agreed to this. On Friday night, Victoria came to Lena's suite with 2 glasses of wine and a knowing expression. Drink, she commanded, handing one to Lena. You look like you need it. Lena took a sip, grateful for the warmth. I'm making a mistake, aren't I? That depends on how you define mistake. Victoria settled into one of the comfortable chairs. Are you marrying for love? No. Are you marrying under ideal circumstances? Absolutely not. But are you making the best choice available to protect your daughter? Yes. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to give you perspective. Victoria swirled her wine thoughtfully. I married Thomas Falcone when I was 22. I was desperately in love with him. Thought he hung the moon, believed every promise he made about the life we'd build together. She smiled sadly. 5 years later, I understood what I'd actually married into. 10 years later, I'd accepted it. 15 years later, I'd stopped fighting it. And when he died, I felt relieved and guilty in equal measure. Why are you telling me this? Because you're starting where I ended. You already know what Adrian is. You already understand the darkness. You're making this choice with clear eyes and no illusions. Victoria leaned forward. That gives you power, Lena. Power I never had. Use it. Lena thought about this. What if I can't do it? What if I wake up every day hating him and hating myself for staying? Then you'll be miserable. But Isla will be safe, and sometimes that's the best we can hope for. Victoria paused. Though I suspect you might surprise yourself, Adrian is different with you than his father ever was with me. He's trying. Really trying. That has to count for something. After Victoria left, Lena stood at the window looking out over the gardens where she'd be married in less than 24 hours. The grounds were beautiful, peaceful, utterly at odds with the turmoil in her chest. She heard a soft knock and turned to find Adrian in the doorway, holding Isla. She was crying, he explained. I heard her on the monitor and thought you might want a break. Lena gestured him in, surprised. You have a monitor in your room? I have monitors everywhere, Adrian admitted, settling into the rocking chair with Isla. I like knowing when she needs something, even if I can't always be the one to provide it. They sat in comfortable silence while Adrian rocked Isla gently. He'd gotten good at it over the past weeks, Lena noticed. His movements were confident now, assured. He'd learned how to hold her so she'd settle, how to find the rhythm that soothed her. Are you nervous? Lena asked finally. About tomorrow? Terrified, Adrian said honestly. Not about the ceremony itself, but about what it represents, about the responsibility of keeping you safe, about the possibility that I might fail. You won't fail. The words surprised Lena even as she said them, but she realized they were true. Whatever else Adrian was, he was competent, thorough. He would move heaven and earth to protect what he considered his. How can you be sure? Because I've watched you for 6 weeks. I've seen how you are with Isla, how you are with the security measures, how you triple-check everything and plan for contingencies I'd never even consider. Lena paused. You're a lot of things, Adrian, but careless isn't one of them. Adrian looked at her with something like wonder. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. I won't. He stood carefully, still cradling Isla. I should let you sleep. Tomorrow will be long. But at the door he turned back. Lena, I know you're doing this for Isla. I know you don't owe me anything, but I want you to know that I'm going to spend every day trying to be worthy of this choice you're making, even if you never forgive me, even if you never see me as anything but the man who took your freedom. I'm going to try to be better. I know, Lena said softly. I've been watching you try. That's the only reason I'm doing this at all. Saturday dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of autumn day that belonged in paintings. Lena woke early, fed Isla, and tried not to think too hard about what she was about to do. Victoria arrived mid-morning with a hairdresser and makeup artist who worked efficiently while Victoria kept up a steady stream of calming conversation. The dress fit perfectly, of course. Everything in Lena's life fit perfectly now, every detail managed and controlled and optimized. She stared at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked elegant, sophisticated, like someone who belonged in Adrian's world. She looked nothing like the woman who'd fled Chicago with nothing but a backpack and a secret. The ceremony itself was mercifully brief. The garden had been decorated simply. White chairs, flowers that complimented rather than overwhelmed. Adrian stood at the front in a dark suit, his expression carefully neutral. But when Lena walked toward him carrying Isla, because she refused to leave her daughter with anyone during this, she saw his mask slip, saw vulnerability and hope and fear all at once. The officiant spoke about commitment and partnership and building a life together. The words sounded hollow to Lena's ears, a script that had nothing to do with the reality of their arrangement. But when it came time for vows, Adrian surprised her. I know this isn't what you wanted, he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. I know I'm not who you would have chosen, but I promise you this, Lena. I will protect you. I will protect Isla. I will give you every freedom I can while keeping you safe, and I will never stop trying to be better than what I've been. That's all I can offer, but it's yours for as long as you'll accept it. Lena's throat tightened. She hadn't prepared anything, hadn't expected to be moved, but looking at Adrian's face, at the sincerity there, the desperate hope, she found words anyway. I'm doing this for our daughter, she said clearly, but I'm also choosing to believe you can be the man you're trying to be. Don't make me regret that choice, Adrian. Don't prove me wrong. I won't, he promised, and Lena chose to believe him. The kiss that sealed their marriage was brief, chaste, nothing like the passionate embraces they'd shared in what felt like another lifetime. But it was honest, and maybe that was better. The small reception afterward was surprisingly pleasant. Victoria made toasts, Dr. Chen offered warm congratulations. Even Adrian's business associates seemed genuinely happy, though Lena suspected their happiness had more to do with political calculations than actual joy. As the sun began to set, the guests gradually departed, leaving Lena and Adrian alone in the garden, with Isla sleeping peacefully between them in a portable bassinet. "Well," Adrian said, "we're married." "We're married," Lena agreed. "Nothing has to change," Adrian said quickly. "I meant what I said. Separate rooms, separate lives. This was just paperwork, just protection." "I know." Lena looked at him carefully. "But Adrian, I don't want to spend the rest of my life hating you. That's exhausting, and it's not good for Isla." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we could try. Not to be in love or have some grand romance, but to be actual partners, to build something real instead of just coexisting." Lena paused, searching for the right words. "Your mother said something to me, that I'm starting with clear eyes, that I already know what you are. Maybe that's an advantage. Maybe we can build something honest instead of something based on illusions." Adrian stared at her like she'd offered him something precious and fragile. "Are you sure? Because I don't want to push you into anything else. You've given me so much already." "I'm not sure about anything," Lena admitted, "but I'm tired of fighting, and I think maybe you've earned a chance, a real one." "Thank you," Adrian said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "I won't waste it, Lena. I promise." They sat together as darkness fell, watching the stars emerge one by one. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the fairy tale ending Lena had once imagined. But as she looked at Adrian holding Isla with such careful devotion, as she thought about the library card in her wallet and the books on her shelf and the small freedoms he'd given her without being asked, she thought maybe it could be enough. The weeks that followed brought change, but not the kind Lena had feared. Adrian kept his promise about separate rooms, but they began taking meals together more often. They developed routines around Ila's care, Adrian handling morning duties while Lena slept in, Lena taking afternoons while Adrian worked, evening baths becoming a shared activity they both looked forward to. They talked more, not about love or feelings or the complicated history between them, but about Isla's development, about books they'd both read, about small observations and comfortable silences. Adrian asked Lena's opinion on business matters that didn't involve violence, and Lena found herself offering thoughts on strategies and negotiations. He listened, actually listened, and sometimes even changed course based on her input. The threat from Vincent Russo materialized into nothing. The marriage announcement had apparently sent exactly the message Adrian intended. Lena was untouchable now, protected by the full weight of the Falcone name and legacy. Other threats faded similarly. Being Adrian's wife was, it turned out, the best security money couldn't buy. 2 months after the wedding, Lena received an unexpected package, a letter from the county library offering her a part-time position. She stared at it in confusion until Adrian appeared in the doorway. "I made some calls," he admitted. "Explained that you had extensive library science background and were looking for flexible work that could accommodate a new baby. They were interested." "You got me a job?" "I facilitated an opportunity. Whether you take it is entirely up to you." Adrian looked almost nervous. "I know you wanted to work there. I thought maybe having something that was yours, completely yours, not connected to me, might make this easier." Lena read the letter again, emotion clogging her throat. "Thank you," she managed. "You don't have to decide now. Think about it. But the offer's there if you want it." Lena started work 3 weeks later, just 2 mornings a week. Adrian arranged security so discreet that Lena barely noticed it, and having her own work, her own purpose beyond being a mother and wife, changed something fundamental. She came home energized, eager to tell Adrian about the patrons she'd helped or the books she'd recommended. And he listened with genuine interest, asking questions, remembering details for later conversations. 6 months after the wedding, on a quiet evening with Isla finally asleep after a particularly fussy day, Lena found herself in Adrian's study. He'd asked her opinion on a contract, and the discussion had evolved into something larger, a genuine conversation about ethics and strategy and the gray areas between right and wrong. "I'm thinking about transitioning some of the businesses," Adrian said suddenly, "moving away from the darker elements. It'll take years, and it's risky, But I want Isla to inherit something she can be proud of. Not just wealth, but a legacy that's built on something better than what my father left me. Lena studied his face. That's a big change. I know, and dangerous. People don't like change in this world, but he met her eyes. You were right back at the hospital. I do regret the choices that brought me here, and I can't undo them. But maybe I can make different choices going forward, build something different for our daughter. Our daughter, Lena repeated softly. The phrase still felt foreign, but less so than it had 6 months ago. Our daughter, Adrian confirmed. Who deserves better than growing up watching her father run criminal enterprises? Who deserves a father she can respect, not just fear? Lena moved closer, not quite touching, but near enough that she could see the fine lines of stress around his eyes, the gray that was starting to thread through his dark hair. You're not your father, Adrian. I've been watching, and you're really not. How can you be sure? Because your father never would have asked himself these questions, never would have considered changing, never would have given me space to hate him and still tried to earn something better. Lena paused. You're flawed and complicated and sometimes infuriating, but you're also trying to be better. That matters. Adrian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, careful. Are we going to be okay, Lena? Eventually? Lena didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed his hand gently. I don't know, but I think we're already better than we were, and maybe that's enough for now. That night, after returning to her room, Lena wrote in the journal Adrian had given her months ago. She wrote about the library, about Isla's latest milestones, about the complicated process of building a life with someone she'd once fled from, and she wrote about hope, tentative, fragile, but real. A year after the wedding, Victoria threw a first birthday party for Isla that was both excessive and perfect. The guest list had expanded to include Lena's co-workers from the library, some of the locals she'd befriended, and a carefully selected group of Adrian's business associates. Isla, blissfully unaware of the significance, smashed cake into her hair with enthusiastic delight while the adults laughed and took photos. Watching Adrian crouch beside their daughter, helping her demolish her cake while getting thoroughly messy himself, Lena felt something shift in her chest. Not love. Not yet. Maybe not ever the way romance novels described it, but something warm and genuine. Partnership. Respect. The beginning of trust. That evening, after the guests had left and Isla was bathed and sleeping, Lena found Adrian on the terrace overlooking the gardens. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him in months. Good party, she said, joining him. Your coworker Linda is terrifying, Adrian said. She interrogated me about my intentions toward you like I was 17 and asking you to prom. Lena smiled. Linda's protective, but she likes you. She told me you seem like you're actually trying, which is high praise from her. I am trying. Adrian turned to face her. Every day. Is it working? Lena considered the question seriously. A year ago, she would have said no without hesitation. 6 months ago, she might have said maybe. But now, looking at the life they'd built, messy and imperfect and nothing like what she'd planned, she found a different answer. Yes, she said quietly. It's working. We're working. Not perfectly, but we're getting there. Adrian's expression transformed with relief and joy and something deeper. Can I kiss you? Not because we're married or because anyone's watching, just because I want to. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was a line they hadn't crossed since their wedding, a boundary she'd maintained carefully. But standing here, after a year of watching him try, of building something real from the wreckage of forced proximity, she found she wanted to cross it. Yes, she said. The kiss was gentle, questioning, nothing like their passionate encounters in Chicago. It was a kiss between two people learning each other again, between partners building something new from broken foundations. And when they pulled apart, Lena found herself smiling. That was nice, she said. It was, Adrian agreed. Can we do it again sometime? Maybe, Lena said, but her smile suggested the maybe was really a yes. They stood together on the terrace as night settled over the estate, and Lena thought about the woman she'd been, terrified and alone in that Kentucky hospital, convinced her life was over. That woman wouldn't recognize who Lena had become, wouldn't understand the choices she'd made or the peace she'd found in unexpected places. But that woman had also been fighting for survival. And Lena had survived. She'd done more than survive. She'd built a life. Not the one she'd imagined, but something real and sturdy and hers. "I need to tell you something," she said suddenly. Adrian tensed. "What?" "I don't hate you anymore. I thought I would always hate you, but I don't." Lena looked at him directly. "I don't love you either, not yet. Maybe not ever in the way you want, but I care about you, about what happens to you, about building this life we're creating together." "That's more than I deserve," Adrian said, his voice rough, "and more than I hoped for." "Don't waste it," Lena said, echoing her wedding vows. "Keep trying, keep being better, and maybe someday I'll get all the way to love." "And if you don't? Then we'll have something else, something honest and real and built on choice instead of force." Lena paused. "I think that might be better anyway, more solid, less likely to break." Adrian pulled her closer, and this time Lena let herself lean into his embrace. They stood together looking out over the grounds, and Lena felt something she hadn't felt since the night she'd fled Chicago. Peace. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still moments when she resented what Adrian had taken from her, still flashes of the life she might have had. But there were also good days. Days filled with Isla's laughter and Adrian's careful attempts at humor and the slow, steady building of something that felt surprisingly like home. 3 years after that first desperate hospital visit, Lena stood in the same garden where she'd married Adrian and watched Isla chase butterflies through the flowers. The little girl was fearless and joyful, utterly secure in the knowledge that she was loved and protected. Adrian appeared beside her, slipping his hand into hers with the easy familiarity of long practice. "She's fast," he observed. "She gets that from you," Lena said. "The stubbornness, too." "That's all you." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their daughter play. The years had softened the sharp edges between them, transformed forced proximity into genuine partnership. They'd learned each other's patterns and quirks and boundaries. They'd built traditions and inside jokes, and a life that felt less like captivity with each passing day. "Do you ever think about what you gave up?" Adrian asked quietly. "The life you wanted in Kentucky?" "Sometimes," Lena admitted. "But then I look at what I have instead. The library work, Isla, you." She squeezed his hand. "It's different than what I imagined, but it's not less. Just different." "I love you," Adrian said. He'd started saying it 6 months ago, never demanding it back, just offering it freely. And this time, for the first time, Lena found she could say it back. "I love you too," she said, and meant it. Not the desperate, consuming passion of their early days in Chicago, but something steadier, something that had survived running and fear and impossible choices and emerged stronger for it. Adrian's entire face transformed with joy. "Really? Really?" Lena smiled. "It snuck up on me. I didn't plan it, didn't want it, but somewhere between partnership and respect and watching you be an amazing father, it happened." "Thank you," Adrian said, and Lena heard everything he meant beneath those 2 words. "Thank you for giving me a chance. Thank you for staying. Thank you for building this with me." Isla ran up to them, breathless and glowing. "Daddy, Mama, did you see? I almost caught one." "We saw, sweetheart," Lena said, crouching to her level. "You're getting faster every day." "Can we have cake for dinner?" Isla asked with the hopeful confidence of a 3-year-old who'd never been told no about anything important. "Not for dinner," Adrian said seriously, "but maybe after dinner." "Okay." Isla ran off again, already distracted by something new. Lena watched her go, this perfect child born from chaos and fear and impossible circumstances. "She's going to be extraordinary," she said. "She already is," Adrian agreed. "She has your strength and your stubbornness and your fierce heart, and your intensity and your intelligence and your terrible habit of thinking you can control everything." "That's a terrible habit," Adrian agreed, but he was smiling. They walked back toward the house together, Isla running ahead, the autumn sun painting everything gold. And Lena thought about the woman in that hospital room, terrified and alone, convinced her life was ending. If she could go back and tell that woman what was coming, the forced choices, the difficult compromises, The slow transformation of captor into partner and fear into love. She didn't know if that woman would believe it possible. But it had been possible. It had been hard and messy and nothing like a fairy tale. But it had also been real and honest and ultimately chosen. Because that was the truth Lena had learned through all of this. Even in circumstances beyond her control, even in choices forced upon her, she still had agency. She'd chosen to stay, chosen to try, chosen to build something real from impossible foundations. And she'd chosen love. Not the kind that came easily or without cost, but the kind that was earned through effort and patience and the daily decision to be better than yesterday. The kind that survived running and fear and everything that should have destroyed it. As they entered the house, their home, built on complicated history but solid with shared purpose, Lena realized she wouldn't change a single thing, not the fear or the flight or the forced return, because all of it had led here, to this moment, to this family, to this life that was imperfect and beautiful and entirely, wonderfully theirs. She hadn't hidden her child. She'd chosen the world she would grow up in, and it had been the right choice after all.